Conservative activists are engaging in a multi-million-dollar fight against environmental, social, and corporate governance investing, also known as ESG investing. I'm sure some of you have heard a little about it from conservatives in recent weeks. Well, considering this is a multi-million-dollar effort to squash this type of investing vehicle, I guarantee you're gonna hear a lot more about it. Now, in order to really understand the motivating factors behind this right-wing effort, we should have a better understanding of what ESG investing is. Take a look.
The way we think about it at Bank of America is it basically boils down to environmental, social, and governance considerations that are part of the panoply of considerations that we as investors consider when buying and selling securities.
ESG at the level of corporates essentially reflects companies' attempts to integrate environmental and social issues into the way they do business, into their business model, and into their strategy.
So a quick recap. E stands for environmental, S stands for social, G stands for governance. ESG investing means taking into consideration how a company's environmental, social, and governance performance will affect a company's financial performance, and in turn, use that to determine investing in the company.
So just to kind of break it down further, it's a way for investors, whether it's institutional investors like Bank of America, for instance, or retail investors, ordinary people like us, to understand whether a company lives up to the investor's personal values. So if you are John Iadarola, for instance, and you're looking for mutual funds that only invest in companies that are environmentally conscious, that you would be able to find that thanks to this ESG themed investing vehicle, right? So there would be a mutual fund or there might be individual stocks that you can invest in. And these companies are supposed to, have some mission, whether it's to fight climate change, or in some instances, they celebrate diversity on their board of investors, whatever it is, right? So something having to do with the social change that progressives would like to see in the country. Now, what's really interesting about this, what really stands out, is how much interest there is in these investment vehicles, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm too cynical, and I just thought, no, people who are investing their money, they just want to invest in companies where they'll get the highest return. They don't care about anything else. It's all about the highest possible returns, right? No, wrong, watch.
According to a Morningstar Direct report, a record $45.6 billion went into the global sustainable fund universe in the first quarter of 2020. Interest in sustainable investing jumped to 85% in 2019, up from 71% in 2015. Bank of America predicts the money in ESG investing could rise to between $15 and $20 trillion because of changing demographics.
Man, oil companies do not like that. They do not like that. Now look, what they're mostly concerned about, and when I say mostly oil companies and conservatives, is that some of these companies won't qualify for investments from major banks or other institutions. So if, let's say Bank of America is looking at a potential investment into a company that doesn't care at all about diversity at the workplace or doesn't care at all about sustainable practices, they might decide, I'm not gonna invest in that company. And that is what oil companies and honestly, corporations like the oil companies that we talk about so often on the show are concerned about. And so lately, you hear this Republican-led effort to refer to it as woke capitalism, essentially try to do away with these investment vehicles. For instance, the Republican House of Representatives plans hearings to highlight what the conservative groups and some GOP members view as the politicization, I can never say that word right. Basically politicizing the investments, right? They see it as a big problem. Potential GOP presidential candidates, including former Vice President Mike Pence and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, are talking about how Democrats have forced their agenda on companies through ESG requirements. And by the way, no one's required to do anything. right? So if a company decides they're going to engage in ESG practices because it might be beneficial for their bottom line, then they're able to volunteer to do that. But no government official is putting a gun to anyone's head and forcing these companies to do a damn thing. We live in the United States of America, where regulation is hard to come by. So if anyone thinks that this is by force, it's laughable to say the least. But also, investors get to invest their money wherever the hell they damn well please. So I would turn around and say the conservatives freaking out about this, you don't get to put a gun to the heads of ordinary Americans or retail investors for that matter and tell them where they can and cannot invest their money. That's ridiculous. So let's give you some more details on who's funding this effort to squash ESG investing. A conservative nonprofit called Marble Freedom Trust and its consulting firm CRC Advisors are leading the anti-ESG push and have spent more than $10 million on the effort so far, mostly through the group's consumers research, people familiar with the spending said. The trust is overseen by Leonard Leo, a longtime leader at the Federalist Society, a network of lawyers that grooms conservative scholars, officials, and judges. In fact, the conservative Supreme Court justices that are currently, reversing rights that were granted to us by the same court decades ago, they're the ones who were tapped by the Federalist Society to become Supreme Court justices. And lo and behold, there they are, sitting in the halls of power, able to make decisions about our lives, decisions that will affect the rest of our lives. And look, first and foremost, it's important to remember that the reason the Federalist Society loves those conservative Supreme Court justices is because of their pro-corporate stances. Yeah, they're socially conservative as well, and we have to bear the consequences of that, and we already have. But their number one selling point for the Federalist Society is how they are fierce in wanting to protect corporate interests. Now, the ESG movement is polluting our culture and assaulting the dignity and worth of people. Our enterprise stands with a growing group of Americans who are fighting to crush leftist dominance in this arena, said Leonard Leo, who again is the head of the Federalist Society. And let's learn a little bit more about Marble Freedom Trust. It was formed in 2020, and it has received a whopping $1.6 billion in funding from Chicago billionaire and former manufacturer Bear Seed. Since then, it has distributed money to groups fighting some of the top conservative causes, including pushing back on ESG. So look, this is really about ensuring that corporations don't have to abide by any ethical standards, don't have to abide by any type of guideline having to do with the destruction of our environment and how they can basically scale back in emitting the pollutants that lead to the climate change emergency that we're dealing with. They don't want to have to deal with any of that, right? They want to be untethered to any type of societal enforcement of their business practices. You get what I'm saying? Because again, this is not about regulation. There's no regulation here. This is just about corporations wanting to do away with options for investors who want to invest their money in companies that, actually give a damn about ordinary people or give a damn about the environment. Now, I do want to give you some hilarious examples of what Marble Freedom Trust and their funders have been up to, okay? So there are more people involved in this effort, and you're gonna hear a lot of the same names over and over again. Some of the major voices in this debate, including Consumers Research, the Heritage Foundation, the State Financial Officers Foundation, and the American Accountability Foundation all received grants from entities related to Marble Freedom Trust, according to tax filings. So what have they done so far? They have distributed model legislation in state capitals to push back on ESG, right? So when I say model legislation, it's to essentially ensure that there are laws against ESG investing. Okay, that's what they're fighting for. They're providing talking points to lawmakers, and you could already see it with what the right-wing lawmakers are regurgitating. They're funding attack ads against companies that support ESG. In fact, there is one digital ad by the Heritage Foundation that I want to show you because of how insane and absurd it is. Let's watch.
What's your business?
I operate drilling equipment, oil and gas.
The E in ESG is for environmental. You're in a dirty industry.
So I can't get no loan?
Well, let's take a look at your company's social policies. Tell me about your plan to create social justice.
Social justice.
Do your employees get paid time off for abortions? And tell me about your diversity, equity, and inclusion plan.
Well, I ain't got none of that. I'm a driller. I just hire good people to do the work.
Well, maybe there's one more thing we can check. Do you have any female co-owners?
No, just me.
Ooh, have you ever identified as a woman? Or even just non-binary? It could really help your score.
What?
Your loan is denied.
So just like a laughable scenario of a driller, an oil driller getting denied a loan because he doesn't identify as transgender or whatever. It's so ridiculous. And again, at the end of the day, what this is really about is taking options away from investors. Which, by the way, I know there's a little bit of a debate about, whether or not you should invest your money at all if you're on the left, which I think is crazy because we live in the system we live in. And if you want to retire one day, you are gonna have to save your money and you can't just let it sit in a savings account where it actually loses its value due to inflation. You have to find investment vehicles, which makes things really tricky because we do have values. We do care about the environment. We do care about ordinary people, and we do want to ensure that we're investing in companies that have business practices that treat their workers really well. I care about those things. So I look into those things when I'm considering, if I'm considering investing money. They want to do away with those options. That is what this effort is, all because oil companies know that their business at some point will be obsolete. Okay, and that's the other thing, right? When we're talking about sustainability, the sustainability of the company is important as well, because we're moving toward renewables, we're moving in a different direction. And fossil fuel companies are holding on for dear life, holding on like crazy. And so they don't want to deal with a situation in which an institutional investor might turn down their call for an investment because they'll look at the company and be like, I don't know, oil companies, I don't know how relevant they're gonna be in a couple decades. Maybe I don't want to invest in this oil company. They're concerned about that too. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that ESG also has critics on the left, and I think the critique is definitely fair because there's this issue with something called greenwashing, where corporations will verbally, rhetorically commit to certain things, but talk is real cheap, right? So let's take a look at how that plays out.
The skepticism around ESG investing is warranted. There are companies that disclose information just for the sake of disclosing. And so far, there hasn't been a lot of accountability in terms of stated goals versus progress towards the goals. How do you differentiate as an investor between a company that's talking the talk and a company that's walking the walk? And here, what we think we need to do is start tracking companies' achievements of the goals that they're stating in their corporate sustainability reports, et cetera. And that's one of the critical differentiating features when it comes to analyzing companies.
In Europe, laws mandate that public companies, asset managers, and pension funds must disclose environmental, social, and governance risks in their investments. The US doesn't have the same level of transparency.
And that's a problem because what ESG investing ends up being in the United States is just a marketing ploy by some companies that actually don't walk the walk, even though they talk the talk. So that is a legitimate concern. On top of that though, what we're seeing by this well-funded conservative effort is that it's working. And it often does when people aren't paying attention and they're strategically working on something that's well funded. So let's give you the details, okay? Believe it or not, one of the proponents of ESG investing is the head of BlackRock, which I did not expect. Apparently BlackRock chief executive Larry Fink has promoted ESG saying it's good business to consider these factors when putting money to work. Climate risk investment, he says. He said in 2020, and it's an annual letter he sent to CEOs. So Consumers Research made a website, whoislarryfink.com, deriding Fink as woke. And how did he respond to that? At the World Economic Forum's annual meeting last month, Fink called the attacks against him and BlackRock demonizing and personal, and said he would like to address misconceptions. Oh, interesting. And then he went on to highlight that BlackRock is one of the biggest investors in the global fossil fuel industry. Don't worry. We're still investing in the fossil fuel industry, don't worry. Okay, I want to clear up any misconceptions. Please don't be mean to me. Please don't be mean to me. Other signs that this conservative effort is working. Vanguard Group announced in December that it would pull out of the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative. Signatories commit to supporting the goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. The move came days after Consumers Research and 13 Republican state attorneys general complained to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission about what it called the firm's environmental activism. You know, it's interesting because right-wing billionaire activism, totally cool. Environmental activism, big no-no, so taboo. And a dozen states have considered anti-ESG legislation, okay? In fact, that was last year. This year, as many as 16 states are considering the legislation. In November, the Labor Department under the Biden administration issued a rule that allows federal retirement plan managers to factor ESG into investment decisions. But a congressional effort to repeal the rule is underway, supported by Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, of course, in the narrowly divided Senate. Because he's a little punk. That's who Joe Manchin is. Little self-interested, greedy, grubby little punk. So when you hear how, what conservatives really celebrate is more freedom, more options. You have more choices under the system that they champion. No, you don't, because they don't give a damn about your personal values or your principles. They want to do away with more options to ensure that the only options you have left is investing in corporations that don't give a damn about the environment, don't give a damn about their workforce, don't give a damn about diversity. And all they really care about is their bottom line. That's it. I guess that's freedom for the right wing.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.